Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Let me start with a question. Have you ever wondered if your emotions can reach and influence the souls of those who have left this world? It's a deep and profound thought, isn't it? Life is a journey where we form connections that transcend the physical world. And even when someone we love is no longer here, their presence continues to echo in our hearts. But what if I told you that the way we deal with grief, pain, and sorrow could deeply affect not just our own lives, but also the peace of those who have passed on? Imagine if your feelings of sadness and longing could create a weight that keeps the souls of your loved ones tethered to this world. It's a powerful and humbling realization that can completely change how we process loss. In this video, we'll explore the idea of transforming grief into love and gratitude, a process that not only helps us heal but also honors the memory of those we cherish. Along the way, I'll share some moving stories and practical steps to help turn pain into strength, so we can continue living a life that reflects the love we've shared. Before we go any further, I want to hear from you. How do you personally cope with grief or remember your loved ones? Do you believe that our emotions can influence the souls of those who have passed away? Let me know in the comments below. Your thoughts and stories might just help someone else who's going through a tough time. Once you've left your comment, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you find this topic meaningful. It really helps more people discover content like this, and it means so much to me to have your support. Now, let's dive into this heartfelt topic together. When we lose someone we love, it's not just their physical absence that we mourn. It's the silence where their laughter used to be, the void in spaces they once filled, and the countless memories that surface, both comforting and painful. Grief becomes a companion, sometimes sharp and loud, other times quiet and lingering. But beyond the emotions we feel, a deeper question arises. Do our feelings, thoughts, and energy impact the journey of the souls who have departed? Across cultures and spiritual traditions, there's a shared belief that the bond between the living and the dead doesn't end with death. Instead, it transforms. Emotions such as love, regret, gratitude, or unresolved pain are often seen as having the power to influence not only our healing process, but also the spiritual state of the departed. For instance, in some philosophies, the weight of unresolved grief or regret can tether a soul, making their transition to peace or enlightenment slower or more challenging. Conversely, sending love, prayers, or light is thought to guide them toward a higher state of being. Grief, however, is complex. While it's natural to mourn, the way we channel that energy matters. Holding on to anger or guilt about the past can sometimes act as an anchor, not only for ourselves but potentially for the departed as well. On the other hand, choosing to reflect on cherished memories, express gratitude for the time shared, and focus on love can create a sense of peace for both parties. It's a delicate balance, one that calls for understanding and patience as we navigate the emotions that come with loss. In modern times, many find themselves searching for ways to connect with those they've lost, whether it's through rituals, prayers, dreams, or even just speaking to them in moments of solitude. The act of reaching out can bring comfort. It's as though the act itself is a reminder that love, even in the absence of a physical presence, is eternal. And for many, this love is the bridge that continues to connect them to those who are no longer here. But what if we could take this connection further? What if the way we think about and remember our loved ones could genuinely affect their spiritual journey? It's a thought that has inspired countless stories, philosophies, and beliefs throughout history. Some cultures encourage the living to celebrate the departed through acts of kindness, believing that good deeds done in their name send positive energy to their souls. Others focus on prayers and rituals designed to guide and protect them in the afterlife. The common thread is the idea that our emotional and spiritual states are intertwined with those of the people we've loved and lost. The topic invites us to look inward. 2. How do we process our own emotions after a loss? Are we clinging to guilt or resentment? Or are we nurturing love and forgiveness? It's said that the act of healing ourselves is, in its own way, a gift to the ones we've lost. By finding peace within, we create a sense of release, allowing them to move forward as we do the same. If you've ever felt the presence of someone you've lost in a dream, a moment of stillness, or even a fleeting sign that seemed too meaningful to be coincidence, you're not alone. Many people share stories of such experiences, feeling that these are messages or reassurances from beyond. While science may debate the nature of such phenomena, the impact they have on those who experience them is undeniable. They serve as reminders that the bond of love transcends the boundaries of life and death, existing in a space that words struggle to define. It's also important to acknowledge that every person's journey with grief and connection is unique. For some, the path may involve rituals and spiritual practices. For others, it might simply be the quiet act of remembering, reflecting, and holding on to the essence of the person they've lost. There's no right or wrong way to navigate this, and it's okay to seek the methods that resonate most deeply with you. As we explore this topic, it's worth considering how we can transform our grief into something meaningful, not by erasing the pain, but by channeling it into acts of love, both for ourselves and for the ones we've lost. Whether it's through creating something in their memory, supporting others in their name, or simply carrying their lessons and love forward, these actions can bring a sense of purpose to our sorrow. Now, before we go any further, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt that your emotions, whether love, regret, or gratitude, could influence the journey of someone you've lost? Or perhaps you've had a moment where you felt their presence or received a sign that they were near. Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories and reflections might not only resonate with others, but also create a space of connection and understanding for those navigating similar journeys. Once you've shared, if you find this conversation meaningful, consider supporting this space by liking the video and subscribing. Together, we can explore these profound topics and create a community of understanding and reflection. But first, let's dive even deeper into the heart of this discussion. Grief is often considered one of the most complex and multifaceted emotions humans experience. It is a raw, deeply personal response to loss of a loved one, a dream, or a part of ourselves. Grief manifests differently in each person, and its layers extend far beyond sadness. It can involve anger, guilt, disbelief, and even moments of peace and acceptance. But it's not just about the emotions we feel as the living. There's a common thread in many spiritual practices that suggest that our emotions, especially those surrounding the passing of a loved one, have the power to transcend our own experience and reach the soul of the deceased. Let's delve into this idea by first analyzing the emotional complexity of grief and then exploring a real-life example that illustrates how the emotional bond between the living and the dead can continue to affect both parties. Emotional complexity of grief. Grief isn't just a single emotion. It's an intricate web of feelings, thoughts, and reactions. When someone close to us dies, we experience shock and disbelief, as if our world has been turned upside down. This feeling is often followed by profound sadness and longing, a desire to hold on to the moments and memories we shared. The sense of emptiness can feel like an unbearable weight, and this weight can manifest physically, mentally, and emotionally. In addition to sadness, anger is a common emotional response. We may feel angry at the circumstances of the death, at the person who has passed for leaving us, or even at ourselves for things left unsaid or undone. Guilt often accompanies this anger. We may replay past conversations or events in our minds, wondering if we could have done something differently to prevent the loss. These feelings are complicated because they don't necessarily indicate a lack of love for the deceased. In fact, they stem from the love and deep connection we still feel for them, even though they are no longer physically with us. However, grief can also open the door to more profound, transformative emotions. Love, for instance, becomes an anchor. While the person is gone, the love we shared doesn't disappear. It remains, and it can serve as a foundation for healing. Over time, we may come to appreciate the moments we had with the person and find solace in the thought that they are still with us in some form. This is where the emotional bond between the living and the dead becomes an essential element in many spiritual beliefs. The idea that love never truly dies and can continue to shape both the living and the departed in meaningful ways. The power of regret and love. A story of transformation. Let me share with you a story that illustrates how unresolved emotions can affect both the living and the dead, and how love and regret can deeply influence the spiritual journey of someone who has passed on. The story of Emily and her father. Emily had always been close to her father, a kind-hearted man with a gentle spirit. They shared a special bond, one that was built on mutual respect, understanding, and love. However, as Emily entered adulthood and pursued her career, she and her father grew more distant. The once strong connection they had began to weaken as Emily became absorbed in her own life. One day, her father fell ill. At first, Emily was too busy with work and personal matters to visit him regularly. She thought there would be more time, but one morning, she received a call that her father had passed away quietly in his sleep. Emily was devastated, not just by the loss of her father, but by the overwhelming regret that she hadn't spent more time with him in his final years. For weeks after the funeral, Emily was consumed with guilt. She would find herself lying awake at night, imagining all the things she wished she could have said to him. She regretted the missed opportunities to share meaningful moments, to make amends for old disagreements, and to express the love she had always felt for him but hadn't fully conveyed in recent years. As the days passed, Emily began to notice strange occurrences. She would hear her father's voice in the quiet of the evening, almost as if he were speaking to her, reminding her that he was still there, watching over her. At first, she brushed these occurrences aside as the result of her grief, but soon, they became more frequent, more vivid. One night, as she was sitting in her father's old chair, a sudden warmth enveloped her, and for the first time since his passing, she felt a deep sense of peace. It was as if her father was reassuring her, telling her that everything was okay, and that he had forgiven her for the distance between them in his final years. The next day, Emily visited her father's grave. Standing there, she closed her eyes and began to speak to him, telling him everything she had left unsaid. She apologized for the time they had lost and thanked him for the love he had always shown her. As she spoke, she felt a sense of release, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She realized that the guilt and regret she had carried for so long were not just holding her back, they were also preventing her father from moving on. In that moment, Emily understood that her emotions had the power to influence not only her own healing, but also her father's spiritual journey. By releasing her regret and replacing it with love, she was helping to guide his soul to a place of peace. She realized that her father had never held any resentment toward her. He understood the complexities of life and love, and he was, in his own way, still with her, guiding her through the pain, helping her let go of guilt, and embracing the love they had shared. The spiritual meaning behind Emily's experience. Emily's story speaks volumes about the emotional bonds we maintain with those we love. Even after death, it highlights how emotions such as guilt, regret, and love don't just affect our personal healing process, they can influence the departed as well. The idea that unresolved emotions can hinder the transition of a soul is not a new concept. Many spiritual traditions teach that the living have the power to help guide the souls of their loved ones toward peace. By confronting and releasing our own emotional burdens, be it guilt, anger, or sadness, we can create a space for the departed to heal, just as we heal ourselves. In Emily's case, her regret was an anchor, holding both her and her father's soul in a state of unrest. But once she confronted her emotions, released the guilt, and embraced the love she still felt for him, it allowed her father's spirit to move toward peace. This story serves as a reminder that our emotions, while intensely personal, have far-reaching effects, not just on our own healing but on the spiritual journeys of those who have passed. As we reflect on Emily's experience, we're reminded of the importance of resolving our own emotions, not only for our own peace of mind, but also to ensure that our loved ones, wherever they may be, can continue on their own journeys, unburdened by the emotions we carry. The emotional bond between the living and the dead is a theme that resonates deeply with many, particularly in times of grief and loss. This connection, though not always visible, can often transcend physical boundaries, revealing itself in dreams, memories, and even unexpected experiences that offer comfort and healing. In this section, we will explore a second powerful story, one that illustrates how love, unresolved emotions, and the need for closure can extend beyond death and affect the spiritual journeys of both the living and the deceased. This story, however, is not about regret, but rather the role that unresolved fear and unspoken words play in the process of healing. By analyzing the narrative closely, we can further understand the significance of how emotional closure plays a pivotal role in both the healing of the living and the spiritual peace of the departed. The story of Sarah and her mother. Sarah had always been a devoted daughter. She loved her mother deeply and admired her for the strength and grace with which she faced life. Her mother, Linda, was a woman of great patience, always putting others before herself. Sarah grew up feeling a profound connection to her mother, who was her greatest role model. But as Sarah entered her teenage years, things began to change. Adolescence brought with it a sense of rebellion, and Sarah, in her search for independence, began to grow distant from Linda. Their once close relationship began to fray, as Sarah's new priorities shifted toward her friends, her own interests, and her desire to explore life on her terms. Linda, on the other hand, did not know how to reach her daughter during this time. She tried, at times, to speak with Sarah, to offer guidance, but Sarah rejected her attempts. Despite their growing emotional distance, Linda's love for Sarah never wavered. She believed that no matter the strain between them, time would heal their differences, and that Sarah would one day return to her. Sadly, Linda's health began to decline, and one day, Sarah received the news that her mother was critically ill. The diagnosis was swift and unforgiving. Linda had advanced cancer, and there was little time left. The news hit Sarah hard. She was overcome with feelings of guilt and fear, knowing that they had not resolved the rift between them. There were so many things Sarah wanted to say to her mother, so many words of love, regret, and reconciliation, but time was running out. With the limited time left, Sarah rushed to her mother's side, hoping to make amends. But, as often happens in such cases, Linda's condition had worsened by the time Sarah arrived. She was unconscious and in the throes of the illness, unable to respond to Sarah's desperate pleas for forgiveness. Linda passed away shortly after Sarah's arrival. In her final moments, Sarah had not been able to tell her mother how deeply she loved her, nor had she had the opportunity to resolve the emotional distance that had grown between them. The pain Sarah felt after her mother's death was intense. The guilt of not being able to make peace with her mother before it was too late was a heavy burden. It became a wound that would not heal, no matter how hard she tried to move forward in life. The night Sarah visited her mother's grave, months passed, and Sarah tried to cope with the loss in her own way. She went through the motions of grieving, attending therapy, confiding in friends, and focusing on her career, but nothing seemed to ease the ache in her heart. Then one night, unable to bear it any longer, Sarah decided to visit her mother's grave. It was an impulse decision, one that came after another restless night of tears and regret. As Sarah stood at the headstone, she began to speak to her mother. She apologized for the things left unsaid, for the distance she had created between them, and for not having been there for her in her final days. She expressed her deep love for Linda, the love that had never faltered, even when the space between them seemed insurmountable. Sarah stood there for hours, speaking to her mother as though she could hear her, wishing that she could feel some kind of closure or peace from this long-awaited conversation. And then, something unexpected happened. As Sarah stood silently at the grave, she felt a sudden warmth wash over her, as if a wave of love had embraced her from behind. Her heart began to calm, and she could almost feel her mother's presence. It wasn't a physical sensation, but a deep emotional one. For the first time since her mother's passing, Sarah felt as though she was truly connected to her, as though Linda could hear her, understand her remorse, and accept her apology. In that moment, Sarah heard a voice in her mind, soft but unmistakable. It was her mother's voice, gentle and loving, saying, "It's okay. I forgive you. You don't need to carry this guilt anymore." The voice was comforting, soothing the years of pain and regret that had clouded Sarah's heart. She wasn't sure if the voice had come from within her own mind, or if it was something more supernatural. But the effect was undeniable. Sarah felt a sense of peace that she had not known since her mother's death. The analysis of Sarah's story. Sarah's story is a powerful example of how unresolved fear and unspoken words can affect the healing process, both for the living and the departed. In this case, the rift between Sarah and her mother was not one of active conflict, but rather a quiet, unspoken distance that had built up over time. When Linda passed away, Sarah was left with the burden of unaddressed guilt and regret, which made it difficult for her to truly heal. The most significant aspect of Sarah's journey is the way in which her emotional closure allowed for the healing of both herself and her mother's spirit. Although Linda was no longer physically alive, her ability to communicate with Sarah, even in a non-physical way, demonstrates the profound impact that love and forgiveness can have, even beyond death. Sarah's visit to her mother's grave became a pivotal moment in her own emotional journey, as it allowed her to express the words she had longed to say for so long. In turn, this emotional expression served as a means of healing for both Sarah and her mother. This story reinforces the idea that emotional closure is not simply about the living finding peace, but also about helping the departed move forward. Sarah's emotional expression and her ability to release her guilt provided her mother with the peace she needed to move on as well. The message of the story is clear. Healing doesn't only happen for the living. Our emotional expression and closure can have a powerful impact on the souls of those who have passed, helping them find peace in their spiritual journey. It's important to recognize that emotions like guilt and regret are powerful forces that can hold us back from healing. In Sarah's case, the unresolved fear of not being able to make amends with her mother had kept her in a state of emotional turmoil. However, by confronting these emotions, expressing her love, and seeking forgiveness, Sarah was able to release the emotional burden she had carried for so long. This release was not just for her own peace, it was for her mother's peace as well. The role of forgiveness and healing in the afterlife. Forgiveness plays a central role in many spiritual beliefs, particularly when it comes to the relationship between the living and the deceased. Many traditions suggest that the living can offer forgiveness, not just to the deceased, but also to themselves, in order to release the emotional bonds that keep the soul tethered to the material world. In Sarah's case, her act of forgiveness, both toward herself and toward her mother, became the catalyst for emotional healing. This healing allowed her to reconnect with her mother's spirit, providing both of them with the peace they needed to move on. Ultimately, Sarah's story is a poignant reminder that emotional closure is a necessary part of the grieving process, not just for the living but also for the departed. By embracing love, forgiveness, and the release of unresolved emotions, we can facilitate healing for ourselves and for those who have passed, helping them find peace in their spiritual journey. The emotional connection between the living and the dead is not limited by physical death. It is a bond that transcends time and space, forever linking us through love and the shared experience of healing. The stories we've explored offer profound insights into the dynamics of love, grief, forgiveness, and emotional closure, providing valuable lessons not only for those experiencing loss, but also for anyone navigating difficult emotions in their personal lives. These lessons transcend cultural, spiritual, and emotional boundaries, teaching us how to process and heal from emotional wounds, particularly those linked to unresolved issues and unspoken words. In the midst of loss, it's easy to become consumed by grief, regret, and guilt. These emotions often cloud our judgment, leaving us feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from both ourselves and those we've lost. However, as the stories illustrate, the journey toward healing is not always linear, and it's important to recognize that emotional closure is a process that takes time. One of the most important lessons is the understanding that emotional healing often begins with the acknowledgement of our own emotions. Denying, suppressing, or ignoring pain does not make it disappear. On the contrary, it often prolongs the suffering. By allowing ourselves to feel the depth of our emotions, whether it's sadness, guilt, or anger, we open the door to healing. It's through the recognition and acceptance of our pain that we begin the process of letting go. Another key lesson from the stories is the power of forgiveness. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as an act of condoning wrongdoing or excusing hurtful behavior. In reality, forgiveness is not about the other person. It's about freeing ourselves from the emotional chains that bind us. By forgiving, we release ourselves from the grip of negative emotions like resentment and guilt, allowing ourselves to move forward. In Sarah's story, the act of forgiving herself and her mother allowed her to experience a moment of emotional peace and closure that had been elusive for months. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about making peace with it. In many cases, unresolved emotions are tied to the need for closure, whether it's the words we never said, the apologies we never made, or the love we never expressed. Often, the journey toward healing requires us to confront these unresolved feelings and take the steps necessary to process them. This may mean saying things we didn't say before, either to others or to ourselves. For Sarah, it meant visiting her mother's grave and expressing the emotions she had kept bottled up. This simple act of vocalizing her feelings became the key to unlocking emotional peace for both her and her mother. One of the most powerful aspects of emotional healing is the ability to seek and give closure, not only in this life but also, in some belief systems, in the afterlife. For many, the belief that our words and intentions transcend death offers comfort and reassurance. Even when we cannot speak directly to our loved ones who have passed, expressing our feelings, whether in a letter, through prayer, or through meditation, can provide a sense of connection and peace. Another important takeaway from these stories is the reminder that emotional healing is often a long and complex process. It doesn't happen overnight. Healing doesn't mean forgetting or erasing pain, but rather learning how to live with it and allow it to inform our growth as individuals. For some, this might mean seeking professional support through therapy or counseling. For others, it might involve engaging in spiritual practices that offer comfort and clarity. Everyone's healing journey is different, and it's crucial to honor that process without rushing or forcing it. Furthermore, emotional healing can be facilitated by creating space for ourselves to grieve fully. In today's fast-paced world, there is often a societal pressure to move on quickly after loss, as though grieving is something that should be completed in a set time frame. But grief is not linear, and it doesn't follow a prescribed path. There will be good days and bad days, and that's okay. It's important to give ourselves permission to feel, to grieve, and to heal in our own time. In addition to the healing process for ourselves, the concept of emotional closure extends to our relationships with others, both those who are living and those who have passed. The idea of emotional reconciliation with those who have departed can be a powerful tool in helping the living heal. As illustrated in Sarah's story, the connection to her mother's spirit did not end with her death. By speaking the words she had never said and releasing her guilt, Sarah was able to restore emotional peace, not just for herself, but for the bond they shared. Through the emotional closure process, the living can also come to terms with the imperfections of their relationships with others. Often, when we lose someone, we are left with questions about things left unsaid, decisions we regret, or actions we wish we could change. The lesson here is that it is never too late to find closure, even if that closure comes in the form of self-forgiveness or the understanding that, while we may have made mistakes, we did our best with what we had at the time. Another essential piece of advice is that it's okay to seek help along the way, whether it's reaching out to a friend, family member, or professional. There is no shame in asking for support during times of emotional difficulty. Sometimes, the process of healing is less about doing everything on your own and more about opening up to others and allowing them to be a part of your journey. Through connection and support, healing can take place in ways we might never have anticipated. It's also vital to recognize that healing doesn't mean the absence of pain. Rather, it means learning how to coexist with that pain in a healthy and constructive way. Healing requires us to shift our perspective, to see the emotional scars as part of our life's narrative, rather than something to be hidden or avoided. Every scar tells a story of survival, of growth, and of overcoming hardship. By accepting our pain, we begin to transform it into a source of strength. Lastly, as Sarah's story demonstrates, healing can also come from finding moments of peace in unexpected places, whether it's standing at the graveside of a loved one or simply sitting in silence with our emotions. Moments of emotional release can come when we least expect them. The key is to remain open to those moments and trust that, in time, peace will come. It may not arrive in the way we envision, but it will come in its own time and in its own way. In conclusion, the lessons from these stories offer a profound reminder of the importance of emotional closure, forgiveness, and healing. They teach us that, while grief and loss may never fully disappear, they can coexist with love, peace, and emotional growth. Healing is not a destination but a journey, one that requires patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to embrace both the pain and the joy of life. It is through this journey that we can find peace, not only with ourselves but also with those we've loved and lost. In the intricate dance of life, we are often faced with moments of emotional turbulence that challenge our sense of self, our relationships, and our understanding of the world. Grief, loss, and unresolved emotions can weigh heavily on our hearts, leaving us feeling disconnected and adrift. However, as we've seen through the powerful stories and examples explored throughout this piece, the process of emotional healing and closure, though difficult and sometimes painful, is also a path toward deep personal transformation. It is through this journey that we learn the true meaning of forgiveness, acceptance, and growth. The central theme that emerges from the various examples of emotional healing is the importance of embracing vulnerability and confronting our emotions head-on. Too often, society teaches us to suppress our pain, to mask our vulnerability with a facade of strength, and to move on quickly from loss. However, this approach often leads to prolonged suffering, as we fail to give ourselves the space to grieve fully and process our emotions in a healthy way. True healing, as illustrated by the stories shared, requires a willingness to sit with discomfort and to allow ourselves the time and space necessary to process our pain. The journey toward emotional closure is not a straight line, nor is it something that can be achieved quickly. It is a deeply personal and individualized process that requires patience and compassion for oneself. The notion that healing happens instantly or in a set time frame is a misconception that only adds pressure to an already challenging experience. Healing is a fluid process, and it is important to allow ourselves to experience the ups and downs of grief without judgment. Some days will feel heavier than others, and that is okay. The key is to continue moving forward, one step at a time, with the understanding that healing is not about forgetting but about learning to live with the pain and allowing it to shape us into stronger, more resilient individuals. Forgiveness is another central theme that we cannot overlook when discussing emotional healing. Forgiveness, as demonstrated through the experiences of Sarah and others, is not about excusing harmful actions or letting others off the hook. Rather, it is a personal act of liberation. By forgiving ourselves and others, we free ourselves from the burden of negative emotions such as guilt, resentment, and anger. It is through forgiveness that we reclaim our emotional power and take the first steps toward true healing. This act of releasing emotional pain is not about denying our feelings, but about choosing to let go of what no longer serves us. By doing so, we make room for peace, clarity, and emotional growth. Another key takeaway from the stories explored is the importance of emotional reconciliation, both with ourselves and with the people we have lost. The sense of unfinished business that often accompanies the death of a loved one can be overwhelming. Unspoken words, unresolved conflicts, and unmet expectations can linger in our hearts, preventing us from finding peace. However, as we've seen in Sarah's experience, finding closure can be as simple as speaking the words we never had the chance to say or expressing our emotions in a way that allows us to release the hold that the past has on us. Whether it is through a visit to a loved one's grave, writing a letter, or simply sitting in quiet reflection, these acts of emotional release can help us bridge the gap between the past and the present, allowing us to move forward with a sense of peace and acceptance. The emotional process of healing and closure is also deeply connected to our ability to find meaning in our experiences. Grief and loss can often leave us feeling adrift, questioning the purpose and meaning of our lives. However, it is in the very act of processing our emotions and working through our pain that we begin to uncover the deeper lessons that life has to offer. These lessons may come in the form of personal growth, a new understanding of our relationships, or a renewed sense of purpose. By embracing our emotional journey, we give ourselves the opportunity to grow, to learn, and to emerge from the darkness of grief into the light of emotional peace. One of the most poignant aspects of healing is the idea that, even after someone is gone, their influence and love continue to shape our lives. For those who have lost a loved one, this concept can offer great comfort. While their physical presence may no longer be with us, the emotional connection we shared with them endures. As we heal, we may come to understand that the love we shared with them transcends time and space, and that their memory continues to live on in the lessons they taught us, the emotions they evoked in us, and the ways they impacted our lives. In this sense, emotional closure is not just about letting go. It is also about preserving the essence of the relationship in a way that allows us to move forward while still honoring the bond we shared. The stories of emotional healing also remind us that it is okay to seek help along the way. The burden of grief and emotional turmoil can be overwhelming, and it's important to recognize that we don't have to face these challenges alone. Whether it's reaching out to a therapist, confiding in a friend, or seeking spiritual guidance, asking for support is a sign of strength, not weakness. Through connection with others, we can gain new perspectives, find comfort, and receive the encouragement we need to keep moving forward. Sometimes, the path to healing requires external guidance, and there is no shame in seeking it. Additionally, the concept of self-compassion plays a significant role in the healing process. As we navigate the emotional challenges of grief and loss, it is important to treat ourselves with kindness and understanding. Often, in our efforts to heal, we can become our own harshest critics, believing that we should be over it or moving on more quickly. However, healing takes time, and there is no set timeline for when it should happen. By practicing self-compassion, we give ourselves permission to feel, to grieve, and to heal at our own pace. This self-compassion fosters a sense of emotional safety that allows us to fully process our feelings and move forward with a renewed sense of hope and strength. In conclusion, the stories of emotional healing and closure offer invaluable lessons about the complexities of grief, forgiveness, and emotional resilience. Through the experiences shared, we are reminded that healing is a journey, one that requires patience, vulnerability, and self-compassion. By embracing our emotions, forgiving ourselves and others, seeking closure, and finding meaning in our experiences, we can transform our pain into a source of strength and growth. The process of healing may not be easy, but it is through this process that we come to understand the depths of our emotional capacity and the power of love, forgiveness, and acceptance. It is through healing that we find peace, both with ourselves and with the memories of those we've lost.